One of the major study areas in archaeology is food production, and why did human beings move to food production from hunting and gathering? And the reason we study this and why it's important is because it literally transformed human culture. We see changes in the structure of culture, we see changes in social organization, we see increased sedentism, which leads to increased social complexity, and it totally changes the human relationship with the environment, and people start to think about the environment in a different manner. And it's interesting to try to understand why, if for 99% of human history humans were hunting and gathering, why pick up this kind of labor-intensive food production? Now this is going to be just kind of a mini lecture. It's not going to include all of the details. It's going to focus just on some really, really basic things. The earliest domesticates, I kind of refer to them as the Big Six, because what's really interesting, if we look at all the state level developments, all of them are based on agriculture of one of these six particular plants. So wheat, barley, millet, rice, maize, potatoes. These are some of the big early domesticates. For animals, we see some debate about what the first one was. Some people say it was the wolf becoming domesticated into the dog, and there's some conflicting dates. Could have happened anywhere from 40 to 10,000 years ago. Many people don't think that this was an intentional domestication, but that the wolf actually domesticated itself by following hunting and gathering peoples and basically eating their trash. Pigs, sheep, goats, cattle, all around from 9 to 7,000 years ago. In the Americas, what we see are turkey, llamas, guinea pigs. As you can see, no really big animals like cattle, because they simply weren't available in the Americas. Now, there are various centers of domestication, and what we're talking about here is independent invention of domestication and agriculture. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Near East. Lots of different animals and plants have been domesticated there. You can see a little bit of a list here. We have barley, date palms, again dogs, dromedary camels, flax, goats, lentils, pigs, sheep, just to name a few, and of course wheat, which is a pretty critical one. And all of these things are not domesticated at the same time. It's over time that things become domesticated. Another center is East Asia. Of course, rice here being the important one is actually one of the first plants domesticated. Millet and soybeans are also domesticated here, as well as silkworms. Sub-Saharan Africa, again, quite a few different animals. We're talking sorghum. Well, these are plants actually. Sorghum, yams, watermelons, oil palm, and African rice. We also see some millet in the Sahara region. Mesoamerica, hundreds of plants domesticated here. Can't even list them all. Some of the big ones are beans. Maize is the kind of big plant for this area. Peppers, pumpkins, squashes, tomatoes, and again, we could go on and on and on. Not too many animals, though. Again, turkeys is one of the big ones. In South America, we have some tubers. Potatoes, manioc are two of the primary domesticates, but we also have pineapples, peanuts, beans, chili peppers. Guinea pigs and llamas are the two big animals. Alpacas also. And then North America. And here it's kind of interesting, as many of the domesticates are actually coming from the weedy family, like goosefoot and marsh elder and sumpweed. And those are some of the domesticates here. So again, why did people adopt a labor-intensive lifestyle? Studies of modern hunter-gatherers have demonstrated that they spend about 3 hours a day in subsistence-related activities, while the average agriculturalist can spend 8 or more. So again, labor-intensive, why give it all up? There have been several hypotheses proposed. We're only going to look at a few. We're going to look at a couple that have kind of been debunked, and one that's still kind of out there a little bit. But the first one we're going to look at is the oasis hypothesis, and this is because it is kind of the first coherent hypothesis that was proposed for the origins of food production, proposed by V. Gordon Childe, and he kind of referred to this adoption of food production as a Neolithic revolution, again implying that there were massive changes involved, and as there were. He suggested that food production particularly rose in the Middle East, or that Fertile Crescent area, because during that Pleistocene-Holocene transition, there was increasing aridity. So what happened then is that oases sprung up around the permanent water sources. So everything was kind of congregated around these oases, humans, plants, animals, and so forth. So for humans, the proximity to all of these species gave them knowledge, kind of intimate knowledge, of the life ways of these particular animals and plants. This allowed them to kind of take control of the plants and animals, particularly animals, and particularly herbivores, because it would reduce their competition for the plants that they wanted to eat, and here they referring to humans. So again, some of the problems with this particular hypothesis is this idea of intent. Human beings can be fairly decent short-term problem solvers, not very good long-term problem solvers. So there had to be a lot of intent and understanding that, hey, if we domesticate these herbivores, not only will we have a fairly steady meat supply, but it's going to reduce the competition for plants. And that's kind of hard to prove or support in the archaeological record. And plus, modern data on environment shows that actually was not increasing aridity. There was a lot of new rain that was happening, so that kind of falls apart. The next one we want to talk about is the natural habitat hypothesis, and this was proposed by Robert Braidwood, and he specifically went out to try to support or to gather data to test Childe's hypothesis. He suggested that this accumulated knowledge allowed for humans to become selective breeders, so that they could pick a plant and breed it for the qualities that they wanted. They could pick an animal and breed that for the qualities that they wanted. Again, an underlying assumption was this was going to be an easier life way for peoples. Braidwood also suggested that if we really wanted to find information on the origins of domestication, we needed to go into natural habitats of wild progenitors. So like, where did wild goats live? Where did wild sheep live? Where did the wild cattle live? And so on. So we needed to look at these natural ranges. That's where we were going to find information on the origins of agriculture. Again, one of the problems here is that now we know, of course, that agriculture isn't actually an easier life way. It's quite labor intensive. So, we'll see. And again, environmental problems here, because we don't find the earliest domesticates in the natural habitats, and actually that's one of the things we use to determine domestication. Are we finding the remains, say, of goats outside of their natural range?